I'm Midwife Pip and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast. This week, I am really excited to join you solo to talk about a subject that comes up all the time. So what we're going to talk about is babies' movements. In that third trimester is typically when babies have more of a movement pattern. Sometimes your team will have a little bit of a conversation with you, almost like weighing up the options. Is it safer for you to keep monitoring baby inside? Or is baby trying to tell us something? So just bearing in mind that yes, if your baby's movements do change, it may be a sign they're conserving energy for a reason. Hello, I'm Midwife Pip and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth and beyond. Now this week, I am really excited to join you solo to talk about a subject that comes up all the time. This is such a frequently asked question. The reason I want to talk about this topic in particular is the reality is being properly informed can not just really lower your anxiety during pregnancy and birth, but actually being really well informed about this topic can actually save your baby's life. So this is a really important episode for any expectant mums listening. So what we're going to talk about is babies' movements. There are so many misconceptions and myths out there around babies' movements in pregnancy. And the reason why we have to make sure expectant mums have real information about this topic is because it is the single most important thing we can monitor as pregnant women to reassure us about our baby's well-being. And it is our baby's way of communicating with us. And that's why understanding what to actually monitor can save your baby's life. The reason being, a baby that feels well, a baby that is well oxygenated, that is thriving, has plenty of energy, reserves and sources, will be active. The same way that you and I, if we feel good, will want to move our bodies, will want to exercise usually. Whereas if we imagine those days where you wake up and you're full of cold, perhaps you've got a fever, you're unwell, the last thing you want to do on those days is go for a run. You want to snuggle up at home, you want to stay fairly still and sedentary, and ultimately you want to conserve your energy just to get through the day. And that's exactly what babies do in the womb if there is a problem. So that means if a baby isn't, for a variety of reasons, but if this baby isn't getting enough oxygen, enough nutrients, and if there is a kind of complication going on in the womb, one of the things they will do as a really clever protective instinct to protect their vital organs and stay alive is stop moving. Because what that does is it stops them wasting excess energy on their arms and legs moving around and allows them to conserve that energy to those important protective organs that they need. So what that means for expectant mums is it's really important that if we suspect a change in our baby's movements in any way, if our gut instinct says that something just doesn't feel right today, it's important we act on it straight away. Because in the rare incidents that actually this change in movements is because your baby's in trouble, the sooner that's detected and the sooner your team can provide care, the better the outcome for you and your baby. We never want to delay this to the next day. Now, to reassure you, maternity units up and down the country see women all the time, every single day, multiple times a day, with changes to their baby's movement pattern. And for the vast majority, you come into hospital, you have some monitoring, your baby starts wriggling all over the place as if they knew, and you go home reassured. And that is perfect. It is the quickest, easiest fix. And I guarantee your midwives, your team are very happy when that happens. So never ever worry that contacting your maternity services because you're concerned about your baby's movements, never ever worry that that's wasting people's time, because I promise you it's not. And I often say there's no point us being awake all night on labour wards if there's mums sat at home in bed worried. That's what we're there for. And we would always rather provide you with that reassurance. The vast majority of the time you'll come in, have a monitoring, everything's actually fine, and you go home. But it's important we don't miss those times when actually that is a baby trying to signal something to us. Now, monitoring baby's movements becomes easier the later on you are in pregnancy. In the earlier weeks of pregnancy, this is much more tricky. And because of that reason, sometimes it can be much more anxiety provoking for mums as well. Because let's be honest, when you're the only person that can feel that baby moving, that can feel like quite an intense pressure. It's quite a lot of weight on your shoulders as the expectant mum. I remember the relief when our babies are born and I can share that load of do they look okay with my husband, rather than it all being on me when they're inside my tummy. So I totally get that. And that's another reason why your maternity care services are genuinely really happy to see you, even if it is just that bit of reassurance. We understand that this is a really precious time, and that one thing you've got to reassure you is your baby's movements. Now, the reason it can be trickier early on is because typically we don't start to feel any movements until around 18 to 24 weeks of pregnancy. Now, for some mums, particularly second or subsequent pregnancies, that might be a little bit earlier. But especially for first-time mums, it tends to be around that 18 to 24-week mark, which is quite a way through a pregnancy in reality. And this is just feeling movements. It's very unlikely at that stage that your baby will have a particular movement pattern. That being said, if you do just have a gut instinct, let's say that at 21 weeks, you know that you do feel your baby every evening before you go to bed, and one evening you don't, and that causes your anxiety, it's absolutely appropriate to be seen. What we know, though, is that in that third trimester is typically when babies have more of a movement pattern. Now, it's always going to be kind of loose. So it's not going to be a case of between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. they do 12 kicks and it looks like this. That's not kind of how it's going to be. But it might just be that when you sit and eat breakfast in the morning, you notice some kicks. And then similar at lunchtime and perhaps in the evening when you start relaxing. Now, commonly, if you start to kind of track and notice when your baby's moving, you'll often notice it's when you're still. It's often when you aren't busy and rushing around. And that's because it can be quite subtle. And so sometimes it's just difficult to feel those movements when you're doing things and you're busy and you're, rushing here, there, and everywhere. So sometimes it is just catching yourself and just sitting down or lying down, putting your hand on your tummy and just feeling, kind of connecting with that pregnancy and feeling what's going on. And it's fine to do that before you call your maternity services. However, if after doing that for sort of 20, 30 minutes, and actually, you're like, no, this isn't normal, and you've got that gut instinct, then always phone. Always phone. But sometimes taking that little pause just before can be quite helpful. So that third trimester is when we start to see a loose pattern that we can then start monitoring, and any deviations from that is important to contact your maternity services. Be that an increase or a decrease, absolutely fine to contact. Or, as I said, that gut instinct. Never underestimate that maternal gut instinct. It's super powerful, and your midwives will always listen to and respect that gut instinct as well. Now, what used to happen and what I sometimes see thrown out there still, which is a big myth, is that we just need to count movements or count the kicks. Now, this was an old way of monitoring movements, but we've moved away from it. Because what you can't do is get up in the morning and let's say your baby has a big little active session and you count your kicks for the morning and then you can ignore it for the rest of the day. But of course, events can crop up later on in that day that maybe your baby's signalling. So instead, we really look at that pattern across that 24-hour period rather than a set number of kicks. Now, there are a few things in pregnancy that can make it even trickier to monitor baby's movements, and that can be really tough. One is an anterior placenta. Now, what this means is that your placenta sits on the front wall. And the difficulty is it almost acts a bit like a cushion. So you've got your abdominal wall muscles and you've got your baby, but the placenta sits in between the two. So it sits right at the front. And that can cushion some of those movements. So sometimes mums may not feel those movements, although they're happening, because their placenta's cushioning it. Typically, as pregnancy progresses and as baby gets bigger, you do start to feel those movements, although they may be a little bit more subtle. Some mums will find that they don't feel the movements inside, but if they actually sit and put their hands on their tummy on the outside, that they can feel baby kicking externally against their hand. So sometimes that works as well. But it's not uncommon for midwives to see mums with an anterior placenta more commonly in pregnancy with concerns about movements. And again, that's fine. We would rather see someone 100 times and not miss something than you sit at home worrying and us potentially missing something. Some other things that can make movements a little bit more tricky is a condition called polyhydramnios in pregnancy, which is where you have excess amniotic fluid, that water that surrounds baby. And when your bump is more stretched and more uncomfortable, sometimes that can be a little bit more tricky. And the exact same thing applies. We'd rather see you loads of times for reassurance than miss something. So please never worry about that. Monitoring your baby's movements is so important. What we sometimes see is that as we get to the later stages of pregnancy, perhaps 39 weeks and beyond, if mums are presenting at that stage with episodes of reduced movements, my brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book, this is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve. Sometimes your team will have a little bit of a conversation with you, almost like weighing up the options. Is it safer for you to keep monitoring baby inside? Or is baby trying to tell us something? Is it actually safer to start thinking about welcoming your little one into the world? So sometimes if you are having episodes or concerns around movements right at the end of your pregnancy, may be recommended that you have a discussion around induction of labour. Now, there's never a right or wrong in these situations, and it's really individual choice. But I always think it's really nice to kind of have that heads up, because if you're not expecting a discussion around this at kind of 39 weeks, and you go into your maternity services expecting to have reassurance and be sent home, and then you're thrown this curveball, it can feel a little bit kind of disconcerting and kind of throw you off a little bit. Now, with induction of labour, especially for things like reduced movement, it's never black and white. So it's asking those questions, using that brain tool, your benefits, your risks, your alternatives, your intuition, and your nothing, to make sure you can make a really informed and empowered choice. The theory around this is that, is your baby starting to conserve energy in those final weeks of pregnancy when we know the placenta can be working a little bit harder to meet those demands of a baby? And if that is the case and your baby's telling us this, then we need to really think about that quite seriously. Now, it may well be that actually, things are fine and it is the position of baby or position of your placenta. And that's where having a conversation about, are there any alternatives, can be really beneficial. We have to always balance that with whenever we do a monitoring of a baby, whenever we do a scan of a baby, that does only give us a snapshot in time. It tells us what's going on in that moment. It can't tell us what's going to happen in 6 hours' time or 12 hours' time or a week's time. But it can provide some reassurance in that snapshot. Scans can look at that kind of blood flow through the placenta, the growth of your baby, the fluid around baby, and kind of looking at your baby's heart rate tracing as well. So there are alternatives in there. It's never, really ever, to be honest, in pregnancy and birth, it's hardly ever black and white. There is often this kind of grey area that may just be that you need to explore that space and kind of see what's going on. But I think it's just useful to kind of have that little heads up that might be a conversation. So monitoring baby's movements is really important, but I totally understand it can feel like this kind of added stress and pressure. And sadly, we really are just their best guide. We really are their best guide in pregnancy. And taking those moments sometimes just to sit back and relax and just tune in and connect and sort of feel what's going on can be really, really important, especially in today's world where, let's face it, we do everything 1,000 miles an hour. Like, why do we all race up the stairs? Why do we have to run up the stairs? It takes 10, 15 seconds shorter, but causing that kind of racing cortisol constantly where we can't actually concentrate on what's going on in our body. So sometimes just taking moments to slow down if you are struggling to monitor movements can be really beneficial, and just connecting with your bump and your baby, taking a few deep breaths, just grounding yourself, lying down on your left side for a period of time. But I totally appreciate it can be difficult. And that's why I want to really reiterate that it's okay if you need to be seen for that reassurance check. It's absolutely fine. These babies are so precious that we would genuinely rather see mums and make sure things are okay than you be at home worrying. So just bearing in mind that, yes, if your baby's movements do change, it may be a sign they're conserving energy for a reason. And if it is for a reason, the sooner we can detect that reason, the better. But the majority of mums who are seen for changes in movements or reduced movements in pregnancy are totally fine. And they go on to have healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. But we do know that it is an important part of pregnancy, an important part of monitoring your baby's well-being. So I hope that helps to dispel that myth around counting kicks and helps you understand why it's important and when it's important too. Now, the last myth that I just want to raise and kind of bust is about babies running out of room in pregnancy and therefore slowing down movements towards the end. This is a big myth. Babies do not slow down movements towards the end of pregnancy because they're running out of room or because they're preserving energy for labour. Neither of these things are correct. Reduced movements, slowed movements in the final stages of pregnancy should absolutely be acted on like they should at any other time. What is perhaps true is as your baby's bigger, you may not feel the complete flip kind of whole belly movements anymore, but the pattern of movement should remain the same throughout the final stages of pregnancy and even during labour. So it is a big, big myth that babies run out of room in the final stages of pregnancy or that they stop and reduce movements to conserve energy for labour. These are both myths, and if you notice either of these things, then it's always important to have an assessment with your midwives or obstetrician. Couple of big myths there that I've seen really spark up and are honestly really, really dangerous. So I hope that helps. If you've got any questions on monitoring babies' movements, then please do drop me a DM on my Instagram page at midwife_pip so we can see whether there is some more support to help you. But I hope that's helpful. And if you are a pregnant listener that needs to monitor movements, take this as your cue now to go and have a little lie down on your left side to optimize all of that nutrient supply to your baby and go and check in with how they're moving today. If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.